At the Battle of Omdurman in Sudan in 1898, the British Army deployed 52 Maxim guns against a modest force armed largely with swords and spears. 12,000 Sudanese were killed. British losses were fewer than 50 dead. Among the cavalrymen present was a young officer named Winston Churchill. 14 years later, the British Army adopted an improved version of that weapon under the designation Gun Machine Mark I Vickers .303 inch. It entered service on the 26th of November, 1912. It would remain in service in virtually unaltered Mark I form until 1968. The Vickers was a water-cooled, belt-fed machine gun chambered in .303 British, the same cartridge as the Lee Enfield rifle. A jacket holding roughly 7 pints of water surrounded the barrel, with a rubber hose running to a condenser can that captured the steam. The weapon weighed about 28 pounds empty, and closer to 50 with its tripod and water. It fired between 450 and 600 rounds per minute, was accurate to 2,000 meters, and had a maximum range beyond 4,000. A crew of 6 to 8 men was needed to carry and operate the gun, its ammunition, spare barrels, and water supply. The design traced back to Hiram Stevens Maxim, an American-born inventor who had built the first fully automatic machine gun in 1884 at a workshop in Hatton Garden, London. Vickers purchased the Maxim company outright in 1896 and improved the design by inverting the toggle lock mechanism, reducing the weight with high-strength alloys, and adding a muzzle booster. When the First World War began in August 1914, there were not enough Vickers guns to equip the British Expeditionary Force, which went to France still carrying the older Maxims. Vickers Limited was threatened with prosecution for war profiteering due to the price it was charging per gun. The company reduced the price, production accelerated, and by the war's end, more than 70,000 had been manufactured in Britain. In October 1915, the British Army formed the Machine Gun Corps, a specialist unit that grouped all Vickers guns under dedicated crews, while the infantry received the lighter Lewis gun. The Corps developed a tactic called barrage fire, where gunners fired indirectly, arcing rounds over the battlefield like artillery to suppress enemy movement. Its men won 7 Victoria Crosses during the war. The Corps was disbanded in July 1922, but the doctrine it created shaped British machine gun tactics for the next 50 years. The most famous application of those tactics came on the 24th of August 1916, during the Battle of the Somme. At High Wood, the 100th Machine Gun Company was ordered to deliver sustained barrage fire for 12 hours to cover a British infantry attack. Captain Graham Seaton Hutchison commanded the operation from Savoy Trench, with targets approximately 2,000 yards away. The guns opened fire in the early evening and did not stop until the following morning. 2 full companies of infantry were assigned solely to carry ammunition and water. 2 men worked a belt-filling machine without pause for the entire 12 hours. When the water supply ran dry, soldiers used their drinking water first, then the contents of petrol tins, then urine. Corporal John Young of the 12th Machine Gun Company later recalled that filling the barrel jacket with urine helped make the war a bit more personal. Hutchison wrote after the war that his guns had fired 250 rounds short of 1 million, and that figure has appeared in virtually every account of the Vickers since, including Ian Hogg's reference work, Weapons and War Machines. A single gun, commanded by Sergeant Dean, reportedly fired 120,000 rounds. The company used 100 new barrels over the course of the night. Captured German prisoners described the receiving end as annihilating. That account stood for a century before Dr. Rich Willis and Richard Fisher of the Vickers Machine Gun Collection and Research Association went back to the original war diaries of the 100th Machine Gun Company. They calculated the logistical requirements for 1 million rounds, including the ammunition supply chain, water consumption, barrel wear, and belt filling rates. Their conclusion was that approximately 99,500 rounds were actually fired, from 6 guns rather than 10. The million-round figure appears nowhere in the official war diaries and originated in Hutchison's post-war memoirs. 99,500 rounds of sustained indirect fire from 6 water-cooled machine guns over 12 hours in the middle of the Somme, with soldiers urinating into the cooling jackets to keep the barrels from seizing, and not a single mechanical failure. The legend was 10 times the reality, and the reality was still beyond the capability of any modern belt-fed machine gun under equivalent conditions. The Vickers served in every theater of both World Wars without being replaced. Before the Second World War, there had been plans to retire it in favor of the 7.92 millimeter Bisa, a Czech design that became the standard British tank-mounted machine gun. But those plans were abandoned. The weapon's closed bolt firing cycle had made it suitable for synchronization on First World War aircraft fitted to the Sopwith Camel, the Spad-13, and the SE-5. In the Second World War, the air-cooled Vickers K variant was mounted on Fairey Swordfish torpedo bombers, the aircraft type that crippled the Bismarck. The SAS and the Long-Range Desert Group mounted Vickers K guns in pairs on jeeps for raids across the North African desert. In 1963, a class of British Army armorers at Strensall Barracks in Yorkshire set out to dispose of approximately 5 million rounds of Mark 7 ammunition that no longer met military specification. They rebuilt a Vickers from the First World War era and began firing. Pairs of soldiers switched off every 30 minutes while a third man shoveled spent brass. They changed the barrel every hour and a half. After 7 days, they disassembled the weapon and inspected it. According to Dolph Goldsmith's reference work on the Vickers, the Grand Old Lady of No Man's Land, the gun was found to be within service specification across every dimension. The weapon saw action in Korea, the Malayan Emergency, Borneo, and finally the Radfan during the Aden Emergency, which was its last operational deployment. South Africa retained a large inventory after the Second World War, rechambered the guns for 7.62 millimeter NATO ammunition, and used them into the mid-1980s, including at the Battle of Quito-Quannaval. India, Pakistan, and Nepal reportedly still hold Vickers guns in their inventories. On the 9th of January 1968, a ceremony was held at Vickers headquarters at Millbank Tower in London, where Major General P. Young, the Director of Infantry, presented one of the guns to the Vickers factory on behalf of the British Army. On the 30th of March, the Vickers was officially retired from service and given a full military funeral at Bisley. Veterans who had used or worked on the weapon attended, and many of them wept. The South African Military History Society wrote that in its 55 years of service, the Vickers killed more people than the atom bomb. The Imperial War Museum records that the Mark I was employed in virtually unaltered form from 1912 until 1968. In July 2022, 16 Vickers machine guns fired together at Bisley for the first time in 20 years, commemorating the centenary of the Machine Gun Corps' disbandment. Nearly 1,000 spectators watched as 16,000 rounds were fired. Each crew represented a different period of the weapon's service life, from 1912 through to 1968, and one crew represented the factory women who manufactured and tested the guns during the Second World War. The event was organized by the Vickers Machine Gun Collection and Research Association, the same organization that had challenged the million-round account 4 years earlier. Ian Hogg wrote that it was the Vickers' absolute foolproof reliability which endeared it to every British soldier who ever fired one. It never broke down, he wrote. It just kept on firing and came back for more. 56 years of service, 2 world wars, every theater on Earth, 1 mark number, 1 design. They scrapped it anyway. If you want to see how Britain's cheapest submachine gun armed an entire resistance movement for $10, that video is right there. Subscribe if you are new. We cover the stories from British military history that did not make it into the textbooks. See you next time.